Art in the public domain. This here's another article by good old Bender. In fact, it's from the same one. There's a lot in here, and I figured splitting it up into two would probably be the best idea. So let's go ahead and hop right in. The art in the public domain. Well, we, myself included, I am not under the EU. Thank God. But looks like they had a decent ruling finally. Article 14 of the new EU directive on copyright and related rights deserves to be cheered by art historians. What's going on? Is it saying that if a public museum owns a piece of art and it's no longer in copyright, it's now fair use? And not only is it fair use, you don't have to ask the permission of the people who own it to put it in books or in films, or you can talk about it now and not have to pay exorbitant fees, which is cool. I mean, the paintings are 500-600 years old. Do you really think you have a right to their images now? I don't. And neither does the EU. It says, until now, museums have relied on copyrights to restrict the circulation of images and to sell licenses tied to specific uses and publications. That means if you want to make a book, if you want to make a textbook, you want to make an art history book, you want to talk like on a YouTube video about art, you can't without violating copyright and having to pay somebody a lot of money in order to use the art that they didn't even paint. And it all depends on how long that copyright is. What's fair? What isn't fair? Is having a copyright on a painting or a piece of music that's 500 years old? I don't think that's right. Especially when they're not really trying to make money off the painting itself, but talk about the painting. That's fair use all day. And so I think this is a good ruling. However, they also talk here about how UK law takes a different view and does not give copyright to faithful reproductions of historical artworks. EU member states have up to 2 years to implement the directive into domestic law, but the Brexit clock is ticking. And the article goes on. I'm not exactly sure what this has to do with anything, although it's kind of nice to get your politics in whenever you can. There is a little bit of problems. Okay, so Bender's kind of a liberal hippie shithead. All right, I'm not going to lie about that. Apparently, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and Theresa May, the former Prime Minister of England, met, and there was Merkel had the paintings in her office from a very famous German modernist named Emil Nolde, N-O-L-D-E, Nolde. It's probably Nilde. He's German. Problem is, Emil, he was born in the 1860s, died in the 1950s. So he lived. He was one of the first Impressionists. And so Theresa May said, "Hey, do you know that old Emil Nolde used to be a Nazi?" Which is true. Emil, he was a part in the 20s. He was part of the German Workers, National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is Nazis. And so Theresa May told Merkel, and those paintings were removed. Now, is that proper? Here's also what happened. Turns out Hitler thought all modernist art was degenerative. Was degenerate art, and so he took down over 1,000 pieces of Nolde's work from all museums. Hitler did, and labeled it. Well, it did. There was one art gallery that allowed Nolde's work to be displayed in Nazi Germany, and it was examples of degenerate art. So it wasn't to showcase his work and to say that it was great. It was to show what art is not acceptable and what art will not be allowed in the Third Reich. So yes, he did have anti-Semitic views in the 20s. I would argue that no one pretty much knew what the hell the Nazis were until Mein Kampf came out, and then after when Hitler gained power in the 30s and started putting in the Nuremberg laws, against the Jews, then you might have an issue. But in the 20s, Nazism, communism, fascism, socialism, they're all knee-jerk reactions to the Weimar Republic and the terrible strain. And I'm not advocating or defending Nazism at all, or anti-Semitism. I think it sucks. However, I don't think that someone's political thoughts that aren't involved in the paintings they do. I mean, if you're doing a political piece, if you're working for Goebbels and you're trying to to rise up the Nazis, then yeah, shame on you, and your art should be thrown out. Fuck you. But that's not what happened here. He did lots of art, but in fact, he wasn't even allowed to do art. And after 1941, he was not allowed by the Third Reich or the Nazis to do art. Was he a Nazi? Yes. Is that shameful? Hell yes. Did the Nazis like him? Hell no. So, to bring it back to here, Nold did most of his paintings, most of his really important work. I mean, you should see the Blumengarten. That means blooming garden in German, and it's obvious that he influenced heavily any Impressionist artists that came after him. Yeah, so Expressionism, just in case you don't know what Expressionism is, let me go ahead and just bring this over here real quick. Yeah, there we go. Expressionism is a modernist movement initially in poetry and painting, and it originated in Germany by old Nold. At the beginning of the 20th century, its typical trait is to present the world solely from a subjective perspective. And here we got the Scream. That's a great example. Yeah, let's go back to Nold. Here's some of his. I mean, look at here's the Blumengarten I was talking about earlier. Look how beautiful it is. Here's one of his more favorite ones, The Prophet. It's a woodcut, it's not painting. But look at it, 1912, 1915, 1908, 1915, 1907. A lot of his major works were done before he was a Nazi. And not all of them, of course, but does that I don't know what the right answer is. I just don't think we should throw away everything. A lot of good science came out of the Nazis, so should we just throw away all the things that they discovered just because they were Nazis? No, we shouldn't. Should we hold them up? No. Yeah. So anyway, at the end here, it talks about. Old Bindor talks again about Merkel's swift rehang is to be applauded, as if swift government action is ever really to be applauded except a national emergency. And too often then, we too often, Bindor continues, to allow people's artistic achievements to whitewash their personal failings. I would love to dive into this guy's past and see if I can bring up any kind of thing that I can use against him so that his opinions no longer matter, so that his art and his feelings and his emotions and who he is as a person are no longer matter because he had some bad ideas decades ago. That's it's like Thomas Jefferson. Yes, he owned slaves, but my God, he was so important to all the other things that make this country so amazing. So to throw out everything someone contributed because they had personal failings is to be a judgmental jerk off, man. Who doesn't have skeletons in their closet? I sure as hell do, and I know you do. I'm seeing it right now. I can see it right now. God, judgmental hypocrisy, and I'm sick and tired of it, man. This guy's a real piece of work, that's for sure. Anyway, he continues to say, Merkel will soon step down as chancellor. I suspect she would make a good museum trustee. God, what arrogance! This guy is a real D-bag, man. I think the only thing you should really judge art on is what its message is, the art, what the artist is trying to say by that piece, and is it any good? God, if we started... It is a slippery slope to start taking anyone's foibles and then having that judge them as a whole. That is dangerous territory. No one could stand up to that kind of scrutiny except Jesus. No one would be able to stand. Nobody. And so, should be ashamed that he was Nazis before they came to power? Yes. Did the Nazis hate the guy? Yes. Was he considered an enemy of the Nazis? Yes. They didn't kill him because he was still a German, but he was a degenerate. And what did Hitler do to degenerates? He murdered them. He wasn't even allowed to do art. So, yes, he had some things that he needed to be ashamed of. But those pieces of art, especially the ones that were hanging in Merkel's office, they were not done during his Nazi time period. Indeed, the Nazis weren't even a party when they were done. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.